Welcome to Techsommet's AI and the Next Era Contact Centers. I'm Laura Zegar, Contact Center and CX Transformation Consultant, founder of Vibe Management, and creator of the Quantum CX MRI Framework. I'll be your moderator today as we explore one of the most pressing questions facing contact center leaders. How do we harness AI to improve customer experience without losing the human touch that builds trust and loyalty? Before we begin, I'd like to extend a special thank you to our tech partner, ASAPP, for making today's event possible. Their support enables us to bring together industry experts and create these valuable learning opportunities for the contact center community. Today's agenda brings together industry experts who are navigating this transformation in real time, from reimagining agent roles to safeguarding trust in an AI-driven world. We'll kick off with a fireside chat, followed by a powerful session and two panel discussions that tackle the biggest challenges you're facing: workforce transformation, AI ROI, security, and the future of intelligent CX. Let's dive in. Our first session is a fireside chat titled "It's Not Me, It's You," breaking up with legacy CX and AI that doesn't deliver. Joining me is Chris Arnold, VP Contact Center Strategy at ASAPP. Chris, welcome. Let's get started.
Hi, Laura. Thanks. And welcome, everyone. Thank you for taking the time to join us today. Maybe I'll start with a little bit about me, my background, just so that everybody can kind of understand where I came from. I started as an agent on the phone. Gosh, it's been 25 years ago now, not to date myself. But that gave me an opportunity to walk quite a few miles in these very tough shoes. Working in a contact center while I was in college gave me a very real perspective of how challenging customer service, which we know customer service is a very big part of CX. And having walked a few miles in those shoes, and then I think over 20 years working for Alltel and then Verizon. Verizon purchased Alltel back in 2008, 2009, and I was part of that acquisition. And so I had an opportunity to work in virtually every aspect of the contact center, all of the frontline operations, back office operations. The last role I had at Verizon was managing all the contact center technology for about 50,000 desktops across the globe. And that's how I became introduced to ASAPP. As an ASAPP customer, I'd seen the technology up close and personal. And I've now had the opportunity to spend the last 6 years working in this AI space. And maybe a minute on ASAPP for those of you who are not familiar with what ASAPP does. We've been around for over a decade now, and we really started as what we would call an AI native company, put together a research group, PhDs working in artificial intelligence, pretty unsure where we were going to apply the artificial intelligence. But our founder recognized that customer service, or the customer journey, customer experience as a whole, was largely broken. It was born out of a really bad experience he had with his cable company. And so out of that, we set out on a mission 10 years ago to help make customer service better. And ever since then, we've continued to evolve. And now more recently, we've launched the Customer Experience Platform, which is a combination of all of these AI native features. And it's really everything. It's the foundation of everything we're going to talk about today. And it's really these capabilities that are going to help us leapfrog and do a lot of the things that the former technologies haven't done.
Chris, between your 2 decades running contact center strategy inside large enterprises and my work helping organizations transform CX from the inside out, we've both seen wave after wave of AI breakthroughs come and go. From your perspective, what feels fundamentally broken in contact centers today that all those earlier investments never quite fixed?
Yeah, gosh, I could go on about this for days. And honestly, going all the way back to my days as an agent on the phones, there's a lot of things that haven't changed in those 25 years. The contact center space, which we know is just one slice of the CX pie, still deals with tremendous amounts of agent absenteeism, attrition. Many enterprises are still on that treadmill of trying to replace human agents. And so that creates systemic issues where all of the new hires coming in, they're not experts. And so the customer experience is negatively impacted because of their lack of expertise. I see largely they still haven't figured out how to bring all of the tools together in this very complex, large scale enterprise that still has a lot of humans and everything that comes with humans as part of it. And so you think about legacy technologies like CRMs and IVRs and what we would call chatbots. These things have come together to try to improve the customer experience, but largely what's happened is the customer journey is still very fragmented. It's still very filled with friction. And these are things that have been around for 2 decades. So we've thrown a lot of new technologies as those technologies have emerged. We brought in websites and mobile apps and automation inside that IVR, or we've tried to do more and more with chatbots. And what has really ultimately happened is we as operators have made all of these investments, and the customer satisfaction scores have not followed. And so we continue to invest millions, if not hundreds of millions of dollars into these technologies, only to see customer satisfaction continue to go in the wrong direction. And it's because of all of the things that I mentioned. And we'll get into why I think where we go from here is very different.
Great insight, Chris. And you have to add some thoughts to that. It's interesting. It's the customer journey and also the agent journey as well that are mirroring each other at this point, where they both are suddenly getting a lot of tools or a lot of automation thrown at them. They're not quite sure how to deal with it in a way that really feels natural. And so it just creates that difficult experience that then ping pongs back and forth. The agent experience becomes difficult, the customer experience becomes difficult, and then they keep influencing each other. So definitely a challenge. When leaders look at their AI programs, they often point to deflection rates or containment as proof that things are working. But when you think about actual resolution, what do you see breaking down with chatbots, IVRs, and earlier generations of AI?
Yeah, in a lot of ways, when I was at Verizon or when in all of the different roles I've played being an operator, I have been guilty of some of the things that I will mention where we chase containment, or in the contact center space, we chase a lot of metrics. When there's a culture of continuous improvement, it creates a lot of pressure. And these technologies have not been focused on improving agent performance. These have largely been focused on reducing cost to serve. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with a company focusing on reduction of cost to serve, because that really should be an indicator that the products and services that your customers are buying upstream actually do what you intend them to do. Anytime cost to serve goes up, it means there's something friction or fragmentation inside that customer's journey that's causing them to require a lot of effort, a lot of interaction with the company just to get what they paid for. And we as consumers understand that. And so I think what has happened is we've tried to throw a lot of, say, self-serve tools. We've created websites. We've invested in different types of conversational IVRs, getting beyond the DTMF 1, 2, 3 decision trees. We've invested in chatbots, all the things I mentioned before. We continue to invest more and more into CRMs, all with the hope that it will reduce cost to serve. That has not been the outcome. And it hasn't even manifested in improved customer satisfaction. And so we have to take a step back and say, okay, how did we get here? And when I work with enterprises of all sizes, largely Fortune 500, I see organizationally a lot of fragmentation. The people that are responsible for the voice channel are not the same people responsible for the websites, the mobile apps. You've got a different team managing the IVR, a completely separate team managing sales and marketing, and then not to mention someone else completely different managing agents, whether they're in-house or they're BPO agents. And this sort of organizational fragmentation creates fragmentation in the customer experience. So what I would like to see going forward is, how do we address the organizational challenges so that fragmentation doesn't ultimately create a fragmented customer?
And when organizations realize they're not getting the outcomes they expected, where do they usually point the finger first? Is it the AI itself, the data behind it, or something deeper in how the contact center is actually built?
Oh, wow. All right. So not to get on a soapbox, but I do want to provide some perspective. And this is perspective I provide my own kids, but you use the word blame. And I have just learned that as soon as we find someone or something to blame, all progress stops. And so I don't think it's helpful for us to find someone to blame. I do think it's helpful to find the root cause of a lot of these issues so that we don't repeat the sins of the past, you might say. But to answer your question directly, in my 25 years of experience, many times across CX, across the entire customer journey, it's really the frontline agent that tends to get the most blame. Contact center agents have been blamed for lots of things for a long time. You could largely say some similar things about retail agents in the stores, and these frontline people are your brand ambassadors. I would say 95% of them come to work every day trying to do a good job, but they've caught a lot of unfair blame for a lot of things that happen upstream from them. And so we have to figure out how to look at that honestly. And so rather than placing blame, which again, all progress stops when you find a place to blame or someone to blame, let's really identify the root cause. Let's look at this objectively and say, okay, over the past 2 decades, how did we get here? What has caused us to make all of these investments, no return on that investment in terms of customer satisfaction and loyalty? And how do we make sure, as we are at this inflection point with AI, how do we make sure we don't repeat those same mistakes?
We're hearing more about agentic AI as the next step beyond conversational automation. In practical terms, what does that shift look like in a contact center? And why is CX often the first place enterprises feel the need for it?
Yeah, for sure. And maybe it'll be helpful. The audience probably doesn't necessarily live in this world. So let me provide a little bit of definition around the difference between generative AI and agentic AI. So think of generative AI as your very talented writer. We're probably all using ChatGPT to generate things for us. And I think now that I've just seen my kids, they've started producing these memes. I don't even know what they're called, but they're these caricatures. And I think everybody in the world is trying to generate their caricature. And so this is the more generative side of the technology. It can write great poems and history reports, and it can do a lot of things in terms of writing. Agentic AI is more like think of your agent as your project manager. It's the one that has access to all the systems and tools and knowledge bases and CRMs so that it can get real work done. It's really the marrying of these two, the generative and the agentic, that will help drive business outcomes. For, I don't know, I would say the last 5, maybe 8 years, we've been very focused on conversational AI, because prior to LLMs and the GPTs and all of these newer technologies, we didn't have the ability to achieve agentic outcomes. And so here we are, we have generative and we have agentic, but it's important to understand both. And the way ASAPP thinks about it is we are absolutely responsible for helping our partners, the customers we do business with, drive business outcomes, real world business outcomes. You might call that containment. There's new levels of opportunity to apply automation really to 100% of your interactions, where we've been limited to a very small percentage of total interactions because of the deterministic nature of bots. And so now it's a whole new day and age where things like the ASAPP customer experience platform can bring all of this together into one location, one system that's comprised of large models, medium-sized models, small contextual models, APIs that dip into knowledge bases and CRMs to facilitate these transactions. And all of this is very different from where we were just 2 years ago, where the limitations of deterministic bots meant that technology was very brittle. So anything beyond paying my bill, changing my address, it tended to end up in a voice conversation. And this is where containment measurements have really faltered in the past. I've yet to work with an enterprise that was measuring true containment, meaning the customer started on this channel and they finished on this channel, first contact resolution. No, what usually happens is the people that are responsible for the chat program are measuring their containment without even looking to see if the customer interacted in the voice channel. And that's an incomplete picture. And it fosters this poor customer experience because organizationally, we're set up for our own goals, for our own channel, and it doesn't recognize the real world customer experience.
For leaders listening to this, there's often concern about ripping and replacing systems that already run the business. What does it realistically take to move toward this model without breaking what already works?
Yeah, it's a great question. And it's arguably it's the biggest challenge because there is no one size fits all. Every enterprise I've ever worked with had a different technology stack. It doesn't mean that it's harder or definitely not impossible. It just means everything is very bespoke. And the way I would encourage the audience to think about, say, the ASAPP CXP customer experience platform is it is not a separate platform from your CCaaS, your CRM, your IVR, all the other things we already mentioned. It's complementary. It is a layer of artificial intelligence that is built to integrate with all of the investments you've already made, whether it's that CRM or IVR or even your deterministic bots. There's no reason to pull out a deterministic bot that's really good at taking payments. No, just have any deterministic bot who is unable to truly resolve that issue. If it can't resolve it, have it hand off to this generative agent. And so the difference is really now, instead of having to take out technologies, you can now add this layer of intelligence to make all of your other technology investments smarter. And there are examples, like I've been working with a customer here over the last year where we are fully replacing the IVR. It made perfect sense for them to have their customers just call the 800 number and immediately start talking to that generative agent. It's a great experience where you're no longer having to press 1, 2, 3 and go down a decision tree, get caught in a doom loop with a deterministic bot that really wants to help but isn't equipped to do so. There are examples of both. But I think the best way to think about this is how can I apply an intelligence layer to my existing technologies to elevate everything that's already in the stack for the purpose of improving customer experience and getting back to really first contact resolution is a lot of what I'm talking about. Can't hear you, Laura.
That naturally brings us to what modern CX actually has to look like under the hood. When you think about CX systems that are built for agentic AI, what capabilities need to be there so leaders can actually see what the AI is doing, govern its behavior, and still move quickly without sacrificing trust?
Yeah, I think we have to be very objective about the investments that have already been made. When nobody wants to go in and deal with the operational challenges of ripping and replacing, and I don't even think it's necessary 99% of the time. I think the real opportunity in front of us is to take bold steps to say, okay, here's how we got here. Kind of going back to how I started this conversation. We've done a lot of things to try to reduce cost to serve. We didn't do it intentionally to negatively impact customer satisfaction, but we haven't moved the customer satisfaction needle. At best, we're flat. And I'm speaking across industries. And so we're now at this inflection point where we can say, okay, we've got 2 decades of history that we can look back on. The last thing we want to do is create a modernized version of the fragmentation that got us here. So how do we have to operate differently? It involves a lot more than just the technology. You can take a great technology and put it in a broken process, and it's not going to deliver the outcomes you're looking for. And so I coach the companies I work with to really start with how do we get all of the critical stakeholders involved? I mentioned all this fragmentation and the different teams that have their own sort of competing agendas, and nobody's talking to each other. And ultimately, it's the customer experience that suffers. So how do we, in advance, because I will say every boardroom in our country, arguably every boardroom across the globe, is talking about their AI strategy. So with that in mind, if you have a chief executive officer who is on the hook for an AI strategy, or maybe a chief customer officer, someone who's super passionate, obsessed about creating a great customer experience, you have to get C-suite level attention to your AI strategy. and you bring stakeholders from all the critical business units or departments in the enterprise, and you create a cohesive AI strategy. Because if you want to have a layer of intelligence that really creates a different customer journey, you don't have one AI solution for sales and marketing, another AI solution for the contact center. You got the website folks, the digital teams, the websites and mobile apps focusing on clicks, and everybody's driving their own AI strategy. If that's the path that the company chooses, you will end up with a modernized version of this fragmented technology. But if in advance, you can bring together what I call this AI governance council, these key stakeholders pull together a cohesive strategy that addresses real world customer journeys. And this is work that needs to be done in parallel to forming this AI governance council. We need to map out customer journeys, not the happy path, not what we hope the customer's experience will be, but for every reason the customer interacts with your company, from the initial shopping experience on the website to what they hear and experience in the retail store, all the way through to when you're trying to save that customer in your retention department. Where are all of the friction and fragmentation points that create customer effort that hurts loyalty and will drive customer churn, all obviously impacting revenue, increasing risk to profitability? How do you stitch all this together? It's an AI governance council. It's mapping these customer journeys and creating realistic understanding of these friction points, and then asking yourself, what is the best way to solve this? How can artificial intelligence, both the generative and agentic versions, actually reduce friction and increase customer loyalty? These are the sort of the step-by-steps that I'm seeing. I'm observing the companies who are going further fastest in their AI strategies are executing on these steps. Now, I will acknowledge this does take more time on the front end, but as I have watched them deploy AI with these sort of strong foundational elements, I am seeing them learn and iterate very quickly. And it's that flywheel, and they are bringing on use cases very rapidly now. So 1 year from now, they'll look very different than they do today.
From your perspective, what role does interaction intelligence play in a modern CX model when it comes to understanding customer needs, friction points, and emerging issues at scale?
Yeah, I think interaction intelligence is one of the key benefits. I will say it's probably more on the reactive side than everything I've talked about so far. But if you think about where we've come from, the quality assurance process in virtually every enterprise is the same now as it was 20 years ago when I was in the contact center. You have this sort of sometimes an army of people listening to 1%, 2%, 3% of interactions, subjectively scoring those. And then you try to pair that subjective scoring of a very small number of interactions with customer post-interaction surveys, which also is a very small percentage of total interactions. And often those have a ton of bias in them because they're either super happy or they're super unhappy. So you don't really get a good view from either of these programs of what's really happening across your entire business. With artificial intelligence, this interaction intelligence, you actually can have some visibility into 100% of your interactions without all of the manual effort of these large QA analyst teams. You have the ability to transcribe 100% of your interactions. You can glean tons of insights from post-call summaries that no longer have to be manually typed by human agents. It's generated automatically. And I think most of the audience is probably familiar with summarization, but there's so much, I'll say, gold in those transcripts, especially when you're looking across 100% of them, because for 2 decades or more, we've convinced ourselves that we understood customer satisfaction and what customers were telling us because we were listening to 2 or 3% of those interactions. Now we're able to take this post-interaction intelligence and say, okay, what are customers saying? What is customer sentiment? Did they start the call happy? Did they end unhappy? What product or service were they talking about? Did they mention a competitor? All of this information is automated and it's brought to the surface so that we're no longer really looking for that needle in a haystack. We now have visibility into the entire haystack. And so you can use prompts similar to how we might prompt ChatGPT. We can ask anything we want of those transcripts. And what that will help us do more quickly is identify those friction points. Where is the customer effort too high? So we can be very surgical in how we go in and we address that, either with technology, it could be a process or policy change. There's a lot of different ways we might address these friction points, but the only way to have that visibility is to use AI across 100% of your interactions.
At the same time, most enterprises aren't starting from a blank slate. From your experience, how are leading organizations modernizing CX in a way that works across existing CCaaS, CRM, and back-end systems instead of trying to replace them?
Yeah, I think it goes back to what I think I said before about it's not just a technology consideration, it's a people, process, and technology understanding. And it goes back to, do I have all my stakeholders at the table? Do I have my customer journeys mapped? And again, these things do take time, but it's what I call go slow to go fast. And what I am seeing happen the fastest in the world of CX, where AI is being applied, is that once I have an understanding of the customer journey, I am now able to figure out very surgically, where do I need to go attack that problem and what is the answer? And so it's not, I'll say, we've had for a very long time this binary mindset. And I'm not 100% sure why, but it's always been voice or digital, human or automation. And I'm reminded in the pandemic, we had office work from home. And the cumulative effect of all of that has really been, okay, do we want to save cost or do we want to drive customer satisfaction? We are at a point with all of these technologies that I'm talking about, we can have both. It's not either or, it's voice and digital. Using the ASAPP CXP as an example, we now can eliminate the fragmentation of these different channels because the AI platform has visibility. It has context across every channel. Customer starts on the website, they're shopping around, they hit the mobile app because they had to go pick their kids up from school, they make a phone call. All of this customer journey, all of these moments that matter to the business are now stitched together because you have a unified platform that has never existed. And it's generative, it's agentic, so it can think and act and reason. All of these things have never existed before. And so now is an opportunity for us to look, okay, what are the implications to people? When you think about most enterprises, the word on the street is that AI is coming for our jobs. You got to get in front of your people. You have to help them see that there's a different strategy. Every employee should already be using AI. Like virtually everybody on this call is using ChatGPT or some large language model for something. Every enterprise should have their employees on the AI train. And maybe we'll get into this in our closing, but the best AI strategy does not ignore the human role. It's not either or, it's both. And maybe we'll get into that a little bit more, but that's the people side of it. You have to address the people mindset. You want everybody rowing in the same direction. And AI will only deliver on these promises that I've been talking about if humans are involved. Process, part of the customer journey. Where are your processes or your policies creating friction and fragmentation for your customer? Where is it negatively impacting first contact resolution? These are all threats to your customer loyalty, which is revenue, which is sending your customers to your competitors. And then obviously the technology, the ASAPP CXP is an example where you are combining generative and agentic AI to create business outcomes that would otherwise be impossible. And on the technology front, I will say there's a lot of great marketing out there. Do your homework and really make sure that AI partner really truly is an AI native solution. It is that layer of intelligence that can elevate the technology investments you've already made. Otherwise, you will be ripping and replacing. So make sure you do your due diligence, and that kind of falls into that, laying a very strong foundation, go slow to go fast. It takes time to cut through all the great marketing out there.
Modern CX is about building systems that can reason, act, and be governed over time. The next challenge becomes less about technology and more about how organizations prepare for what's ahead. From what you've seen, what changes inside the organization are most critical to support this new CX model? Is it leadership mindset, operating structure, how teams work together, or all of the above?
Yeah, I think I'll take this opportunity to double down on the people side of this sort of AI strategy, because it's so easy for us to, again, have that binary mindset. Okay, we're here to talk about automation. That means no human involvement. There's no way I can reduce my cost to serve if I don't eliminate the humans. Okay, I think there will be some natural things that happen. We won't get into that. But if you want to have an AI strategy that transforms your business, you have to consider the people. So let's start with AI governance. Just a reminder that there are critical stakeholders across the different business units of your company. You got people that are responsible for digital platforms, websites, mobile apps, and probably some other things now where you're trying to drive self-serve again so that you can reduce cost to serve. Totally fine. But those things have to work. When there needs to be some connection, when they don't work or they drive from the website, they drive traffic into a contact center for sales, a telesales, it needs to really make sure that it maintains that context. If I just left the website and I end up in a contact center, I want them to know what I was shopping for. And so how do you create this seamless customer journey where there's always context? If I have to change channels, the company knows where I've been, what I've clicked on, what I'm interested in. It's not that hard. We've been chasing omni-channel for more than 20 years. As long as I can remember, omni-channel has just been a buzzword. I haven't encountered a single company that has actually achieved it. With, say, ASAPP CXP, where you have this unified platform that works across every one of these channels, and it's that layer of intelligence that keeps the context and it can think and act and reason, you can now achieve omni-channel outcomes. And so how do we address the people part? How do we make sure we've got stakeholders at the table so that we don't create more fragmentation because everybody's chasing their own agenda? Okay, and then as you get to the contact center, instead of the mantra being AI is taking our jobs, which by the way, that's been around for a very long time. There's always something taking contact center jobs. And all of those deterministic bots didn't seem to do that. And so instead of having this doomsday outlook, we really have to get in front of those frontline employees, again, brand ambassadors, and really help them understand the role AI plays and let them become part of it. In fact, it's what they've been asking for since I was an agent on the phone. Instead of AI assisting the agent, which 2 or 3 years ago, that's where ASAP was playing. We were playing in a field where let's go retrieve as much information and serve it up to the human agent in real time to make their jobs easier, which means reduce their average handle time, which means reduce cost to serve, okay? But now instead of AI assisting the human, we are already at a place where the human can assist the AI. Let the generative agent do all the talking and let the human agent do what we do best, which is critical thinking, empathy, all of these moments that matter when you have a policy decision that, may not look like what it should look like in the policy compliance document. Give the human the opportunity to just evaluate that. And so instead of taking a 10 or 15-minute call, take 30 seconds and let them review the decision that needs to be made and how to respond with balance and empathy, which is what we humans still do best. And then send the generative agent back to finish the conversation, the agentic AI to do whatever it needs to do in the systems, whether it's change a price plan, give a credit, whatever that thing is, and then achieve resolution as a result. And you do that at a fraction of the cost, but you've got to bring humans along with you. And so the role of the human agent completely changes when it's now supervising the AI. Think about all of those quality analysts that I mentioned before. Maybe instead of them listening to and subjectively scoring 1%, 2%, 3% of calls, Now they are using low and no code tooling to write these flows, to run simulations before this bot gets put into production in front of the customer. They can now run simulations. Again, all of these are capabilities of the ASAPP customer experience platform. It's all in one tool, one platform, one interface. Let them run simulations instead of spending gazillions of dollars on 1, 2, 3% of interactions and then hoping the coaching changes human behavior. Actually make the changes to how the generative agent interacts with the customer once and for all. And then you can simulate it. And then on the back end, instead of having great reporting, which has largely been volumes and AHT and those sorts of things that I mentioned, survey scores before, instead of having the reporting, now you can actually have the interaction intelligence that I was mentioning before, actionable insights to help you address these friction points in the customer journey. But it really does start with people. It's time for every role that I've talked about to evolve because it's leveraging AI. It's not about eliminating people. It's about really elevating the work that humans are doing because we are using AI for what it is, which is a tool.
For CX and technology leaders listening today, where should their focus realistically be over the next 12 to 24 months if they want to move in this direction without getting overwhelmed?
Yeah, I encourage everybody on this call only because I've observed large enterprises, really enterprises of all sorts of sizes, follow this almost playbook where it's first address the people side of things. If you really want to use AI to create the most value. And when I talk about value, I always talk about it in customer value, employee value, and ultimately shareholder value, which is really just driving these business outcomes that we're all on the hook for. And so how do you do that? You need to make sure we don't repeat the sins of the past, which is start with this AI governance council. If your company isn't really clear on its AI strategy and how this layer of intelligence can apply to every leg of the customer journey, it needs to start with the C-suite. You need to get real clear from the top, the CEO, chief customer officer. Here's what we're doing. Here's the North Star, which really needs to be customer obsession. And then I want every department head to form this AI governance council so that every part of the organization is rowing in the same direction. We've got one AI strategy. We've got one brain, which is the only way to create this seamless customer journey because one brain has all the context across all of these different potentially fragmented departments, potentially fragmented systems or solutions. So AI governance, get all your critical stakeholders in the room, create a cadence of we're all obsessed over the customer experience. And then really make sure, in addition to that, and in parallel, you've mapped out these customer journeys. There's no real way to apply this layer of intelligence in a way that will change outcomes if you don't understand where the friction points are today. Because I'm not talking about ripping and replacing legacy technologies, particularly the ones that are working well. If you've got a deterministic bot that is really great at taking payments and changing addresses, let it do what it does. But there's still tremendous amounts of opportunity to identify where the friction points are so that you can realize these leapfrog opportunities created by these new generative and agentic AI solutions. So it's AI governance, it's customer journey mapping, and then really make sure you're bringing your people. The human side of this for the next couple of years is absolutely critical. Every role needs to evolve inside the organization, and it's evolving because of how it's going to leverage AI and how it's going to assist the AI. When it evolves, you really want to make sure you've got an AI partner that offers, say, observability. You'll hear a lot about observability and trust. You need to be able to see what the AI is doing and how it's driving outcomes or not. Where could it be hallucinating? All of these things that we're so afraid of. With the right platform, you absolutely can see these things and mitigate them before they ever become a risk. And so all these are capabilities that are ready today. You just need to make sure you do your due diligence and find the right AI partner, and then do not neglect the importance of the role of the human being.
All right, great insights, Chris. Thank you. We are going to go to a few questions. The first one, many AI failures are blamed on bad data. So what does good enough data actually look like to deliver value in contact centers?
Yeah, in many ways, the quality of your data will drive these outcomes. And so this is where I think the importance of several things. The data does need to be evaluated for accuracy, but the best way to do that, in my mind, is to run these simulations that I talked about. You'll have your technology team that will have access to create APIs or use APIs that already exist into systems. You have, like, part of the ASAPP CXP is we have an API transformation layer. And what that transformation layer does, it helps us take what we would consider imperfect data and cleanse it, where maybe it's returning way too much information and it's so much information that it would confuse the technology, or we can add to. And so that transformation layer really helps take systems, like I think about knowledge bases and I think about CRMs where there's tremendous amounts of data. You call an API, it wasn't built for a generative agent to go have a conversation with your customer. This transformation layer mitigates that. And then when you have these things in place, you have the APIs, you have the hooks into the knowledge bases where all this lives. You can scrape your website for FAQs. There's so many different ways to pull data back. You run the simulation and see if it's producing a reliable, trustworthy answer to your customer. That's the only way to do it. Now, I do think it's important for enterprises to look at their data. I see a lot more companies deploying CXPs or CDPs, customer data platforms. This is where we're taking lots of disparate sources of data and bringing it into a single location. Not everybody wants to make that investment, and that investment isn't always necessary. But these are different ways that you can mitigate what the question asked about is imperfect sources of data need to be mitigated. Sometimes that's making sure your knowledge base is updated. Sometimes it's using an ASAPP API transformation layer. So there's a number of different ways to do it, but the simulation and the observability within the platform itself, within the AI platform, is how you make sure that you don't create bad customer experiences.
Next question, is real-time interaction intelligence critical at this time? Or would you recommend starting with post-interaction intelligence and then pivoting to more real-time?
I'm leaning towards the latter because it really becomes a question of priorities. And I think the interaction intelligence that I mentioned before, if you're starting new, you may not be doing anything with your transcription today. In fact, you may not even have transcription. If you start with transcription, you want to put some of the things I mentioned earlier in place. I think summarization is a fantastic use case because it's hard to find a better return on that investment where you're no longer spending 30 to 60 seconds on every call manually typing very imperfect notes that you do nothing with, by the way. So summarization is a great use case, but I think starting with historical insights will point you to the areas in your customer journey that need to be addressed, probably by teams upstream, whether it's sales, marketing, the product team. And that is a great place to start. And as you deploy more and more of your interactions to the generative agent and your human agents are supervising the AI, you will start to see where the real opportunities are for real-time insights. But start with historical, follow this order of operations, if you will, and then you will see what meat is left on the bone for real time later on.
Great. And one last question, how does ASAPP CXP practically create that shared intelligence layer across voice, chat, CRM, and backend systems without ripping everything out?
Yeah, so it really comes down to I don't want to get into a technical answer, but just know with the ASAPP CXP, it's a layer of intelligence that has hooks into voice interactions, which it's a very lightweight integration that gives us access to the voice stream that allows us to transcribe everything. all the chat or hopefully by now asynchronous messaging interactions, they're already transcribed. So you take all of that transcription across all of your customer interactions, and it allows you to take action on what's happening in real time, whether it's using a generative agent to interact real time in voice or a generative agent to interact real time in chat or asynchronous messaging. That's the conversation side of it. And then I mentioned before, hooks into APIs or APIs and hooks into knowledge bases. That's what enables the agentic side of it, for it to think and reason, and it understands the context of your business. These are the integration points that gives the system, which is a single unified platform, visibility into every voice interaction, every chat interaction. We have the ability to see activity on the website, in a mobile app. And when it's all fed into one single platform, we never lose context. And so as the customer goes from the website to the mobile app to chat or asynchronous messaging to voice, we're able to maintain that context so your customer is never starting over, which is by far the most annoying thing. I don't have time to share a story, but it just happened yesterday. I repeated myself, I don't even know how many times, to my mortgage company, and you don't have to do that anymore when you have this sort of unified platform across all those channels.
Great, thank you. That's all the time we have for questions. One last question for you, Chris. If there's one shift in how leaders think or act that really matters as they rethink CX and AI, what would you want people to walk away with and start doing differently?
Yeah, I think it probably, off the top of my mind, it is that binary mindset. I haven't seen a technology that can really deliver on omni, which you can get into conversation about omni-channel and opti-channel, or what I call optimal channel. You want both. And honestly, it's how do we avoid making the mistakes we've made in the past that ultimately got us here? It's by having not an either or binary mindset. It's having a both and. We can reduce cost. We can drive customer satisfaction. We can create a unified customer journey across all the channels. When we bring all the right stakeholders on, we have everybody with a seat at the table with one mission in mind, which is to be obsessed about the customer journey. How do we leverage people, process, and technology to create a seamless experience? And ultimately, it's really going to come down to the AI intelligence layer that you deploy, and you really want to make sure you have an AI partner that understands your business. So I think that says a lot, but really do your due diligence. Find a great AI partner that's going to be with you along this journey. Don't be afraid to start small. Just get started, and then learn and iterate and watch that flywheel take off and your business transform.
Great, thank you. We actually have one more question that snuck in really quickly. If you were rebuilding a contact center from scratch in 2026, what legacy assumptions would you completely discard?
That is a great question. The first one that comes to mind is agents aren't the problem. We've so often, it goes back to the question you asked me about blame. We've so often blamed the humans, and we've created a very challenging environment for those human agents. So as part of the people consideration, instead of vilifying those human agents, we now have an opportunity to leverage this technology in a way that really elevates the human experience. So if you are a contact center leader that believes customers can never be satisfied, agents don't want to do a good job, they really don't want to work here, disregard that. Set that aside and understand that if we deploy this technology with humans in mind in the right way, customers win. Agents are going to get what they've been looking for a very long time, which is a very, I don't want to say stress-free job. They're going to have schedule flexibility. They'll have far fewer customers yelling at them. They're dealing with less complexity, less emotive interactions. And so they can play a very critical role in the success of the AI. And that's the front office. The back office, very similar. We can elevate a lot of jobs. So I would say really double down on how you evolve the role of really everybody that works in the CX customer journey space and how do we all leverage AI to really achieve all these outcomes that I've been talking about?
Great answer. That's an excellent note for us to wrap up on. Certainly, I think that speaks to a lot of the leadership principles I use when I work with companies on AI, as far as really challenging those legacy beliefs and assumptions, as far as how the customer experience should work, what works, what doesn't work. So that's a great question and answer to showcase that. So thank you for your insights today, Chris.
Yeah,
We've
thanks for
all walked
having me.
away with some great information and excellent perspective on where to take the contact center into the AI world.
Yeah. Good luck to everyone out there.